Hi, everybody. This is Scott Kennedy. I'm the Trustee Chair in Chinese Business and Economics here at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And I'm delighted to introduce you to a new report which we just issued called The Power of Innovation to Strategic Value of China's High-Tech Drive. We've been working on this baby for quite some time, and we're really glad that we have it out now. The report is not svelte. It comes in at 146 pages. We hope that doesn't dissuade you from reading it. And it looks at China's high-tech drive from a whole variety of perspectives. First, we lay out the scholarly debate about it, and then we look at the debate over whether or not this has implications for China's international power. And then we actually delve into innovation and technology trends in China, and we look at what that really means for China's military capabilities, as well as Chinese participation in international technical standards. And then the report concludes with a discussion of the policy options for the United States and like-minded countries. How should they respond to China's high-tech drive? Over the next few weeks, we'll have additional videos that delve into specific parts of these questions. But today what I want to do is just sort of lay out the very beginning about why did we decide to look at this issue, and a couple examples of industries that raise questions to me based on the work that we've done that lead us to end up with answers on analysis and on policy that are a little bit different than what other scholars in universities and think tanks have been proposing. So let me say a little bit about the debate that exists on the question first of Chinese innovation, right? So originally, most folks had the view that China couldn't innovate because it was authoritarian, because of the political system, the education system, which doesn't encourage creativity. China couldn't innovate. It had to import high-tech products. But what we've seen over the last 15 years is a shift in that debate, where we see some people now really arguing, like Dan Wang does in his latest book, Breakneck, that China really is an innovation juggernaut, that there's basically no area in which the Chinese cannot be successful in innovation. And his book goes through a lot of different sectors, as well as infrastructure and high-speed rail where the Chinese have been successful. In between those two poles is the view that Chinese innovation varies dramatically from sector to sector, from region to region, and it really just depends on the various mix of policies, the type of companies, the state of the global industry. And that debate's not been resolved, and we try to address that debate in this report. The second debate that this report really tries to engage is that about Chinese power. And again, there's a range of views. Some folks believe that China has become a global superpower, or it's on its way to. And as a result of that, the U.S. and China are headed for significant conflict between these two superpowers. Hence the title of Graham Allison's book, Destined for War. And if you go through it, it's not a lot of detail about China's economic success, but it does basically depend on the view that China is a technology juggernaut with one of the world's largest economies and is a peer with the United States. But there are other points of view still. There are others who argue, in fact, that the most important characteristics of China's economy is its debt, its aging population, all of the problems that exist in China's economy, and that it's long peaked, and that the real danger for the world is that China is going to try to hold on to its international position despite all of the domestic economic problems that it has. It's hiding its weaknesses that is the source of the vulnerability for peace between the rest of the world and China. And then you get some folks who say, you know what, actually it's a mixed picture, that China's made a tremendous strides in technology, but it's got a lot of debt, it has an aging population, it has lots of challenges that make it what David Shambaugh of George Washington University calls a partial power. So the goal of this report is to have an analysis about both of these questions and see how they're linked. And then what does that mean for American policy? Of course, if China is a tech juggernaut, if it has no economic weaknesses, the U.S. is probably going to want to respond in one way. If it is extremely weak, if it is not a threat in various industries, that probably leads us down a different path of policy. And if it's somewhere in the middle, it depends what that mix looks like in terms of determining really what policy should be like. So that's the purpose of the report, in order to create sort of an analytical foundation on what China looks like and its international influence to then determine what American policy ought to be. I'm not going to answer all those questions today for you, but what I do want to highlight first is on the technology analysis that we did looking at innovation in China. We found a mixed picture, and I'm going to give you a couple examples, but first thing I want to show you is that China's overall trajectory compared to where it was 20 years ago shows that it's become a leading technological player relative to everybody else. China has separated itself from Brazil, India, the rest of the global south and developing countries. This is the Global Innovation Index developed by the World Intellectual Property Organization. They have the best measures of technology innovation, 103 or more, that they collect year on year, very comparable across the countries and over time. This is not just depending on Chinese data, this is looking at a lot of various sources, and you can tell that China really now is a peer with the rest of the world's most advanced innovators. And in the region, China is just behind South Korea and Singapore based on the metrics of the Global Innovation Index. And so really, it's not a Potemkin village when you see individual signs of success in China. It's genuine change that is captured in the numbers, but it's also captured when you do work on the ground in China and you look broadly. Let me point out one area that impresses me a lot, and it also impresses two colleagues who I really respect at the Asia Society, Lizzie Li and Jing Qian, who wrote a really good paper in Nature a few weeks ago that highlights China's growing prowess in biotech and in pharmaceuticals. I've visited a lot of Chinese pharmaceutical companies over the last several years, and I don't want to talk about any individual one of them by name because I'm not trying to boost anyone's stock or crush anyone's stock or anything like that. But I'll tell you, when I show up at these companies, they're very distinctive. They don't look like Chinese steel companies, chemical companies. The people that you meet in Chinese pharmaceutical companies consistently, every single time, are folks who have studied in the United States or Europe and worked for pharmaceutical companies. Almost without exception, that's what you'll find in the bios of all of these folks. And if you talk to them, you realize that, oh, well, you lived in Indianapolis. Well, so did I, because, that's where Eli Lilly is. Or you were in New Jersey. Well, I was there and I worked for another company. And many of these folks have offices in Bethesda, Maryland, right down the street from the FDA. And they really understand the global ecosystem. They know how to raise money, do trials, how to bring products to market, and they've collaborated through education and their careers with pharmaceutical companies around the world. And as a result of that, as the data that Lizzie Li and Jing Qian provide that's on this slide, we cite some of this data, but not in the graphic form, and it was really why I wanted to show their piece today, how much progress China has made in not just creating generic drugs, but actually innovating new products and new drugs and bringing them to market, often in collaboration with Western pharmaceutical companies. And these are therapies which are saving lives in China and the rest of the world. That's a genuine health benefit for folks around the world. Of course, there are also data security concerns, other kinds of concerns that folks have about China's biopharma sector, and those are worth grappling with. But on the positive side, China's innovation is really quite impressive and distinctive from where it was a few years ago. Now, at the same time, let's also not lose sight of the fact that things aren't perfect in China. Everyone knows about debt and demography and everything. But even in technology sectors, there are failures. And I'm going to mention one here that is stuck out for quite some time, and you see it on the screen. And that has to do with the point of the pen here that I have. That's called the nib. And the thing about nibs is that the machining for this is very precise. To get the ink to come in just at the right amount, to leave at the right amount, to make a beautiful line, that's hard to do. In 2015, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang went to a factory in China and discovered that these pen tips are still primarily imported, that China was importing the best nibs from Switzerland and Japan. And so he said, we need an industrial policy to reduce our dependence on imported nibs. So they gave companies in China somewhere over 20 million US dollars, and they went to work. In 2017, it appeared that Chinese companies had cracked the code and figured out how to make the world's best nibs, or at least as good as anybody else. But if you look at the trade data, China still imports almost all of its best nibs from Switzerland and Japan to this day. And why is that? Why is China still dependent? It could be that just nibs aren't important, that it's not like Switzerland or Japan is going to hold China back and threaten it with economic coercion so that China just has leaky pages with ink spilled all over the places. That's not going to happen. But it's really interesting that this is a technology which is hard to master, and the Chinese have had difficulty doing it. And I think what we found in our research, going around China to different factories, looking at different industries, is that it's a mixed record. It's uneven. Overall success, but you'll find industries where the Chinese are doing really well, and industries where they're doing where they're still struggling. And so the power of innovation is not meant to be a report that just says China is doing fantastic, that it's all powerful, but actually that if you go on the ground, if you go around the country, if you look at the quantitative data, if you interview competitors, American companies and others, that there's a lot of success, that China doesn't look anything like it did 20 years ago, but there's still real significant challenges that Chinese companies and different industries are facing. And that means that when you're trying to think about policy, what should be the appropriate policy of the United States and others toward China, it's not just going to be, well, they're a tech superpower and we have to do everything we can because they are a tech superpower. And it's not going to be that this is a Potemkin village of tech success and actually it's all a basket case. It's somewhere in the messy middle. And that messiness means that a analysis that it's all black or all white, and that a policy prescription of either or, neither of those are going to make much sense for the United States. So over the next few weeks, we'll talk more about that in these video sessions, but I encourage you all to go to csis.org. You can download The Power of Innovation. You can look at it, and please send us and share us your feedback, because we're looking to make the analysis and the policy suggestions as strong as we can. And because we work in a think tank, this is constantly going to be a work in progress, and so we look forward to that conversation with all of you.